get to share it for a lot. Let us pray. God, thank you for this time. Thank you for sharing and thank you for information. Thank you that we are able to make ourselves wiser and more knowledgeable. And thank you for the hands and the minds who are sharing with us. We pray that you would strengthen them in their work. Thank you for the time that they are spending with us, and that we may all take what is provided and make good use of it. We pray in your many names, the name of love. Amen.
For our older adult members that will join us a little bit later, and since this is recorded, you'll be able to see the full measure of our meeting. I'm not going to go detail introducing all of our guests from Whtiman Walker and the associated organizations, but I'll pitch everything to Amy Nelson from Whtiman Walker, who will introduce Melanie Carl, June Fan, Nicole Bellows, and Holly Eaton. And my apologies if I got anyone's name wrong. So, Amy Nelson, would you please come forward? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. We're really delighted to be here. I think this is something we try to do on an annual basis, and of course, we so much value our partnership with MCC Church. So I'm Amy Nelson, she/her pronouns, Director of Legal Services at Whtiman Walker Health, and I'm joined by my colleague Lee Hicks, who's going to wave. Lee is our operations manager and amazing connector to all things community. Behind her is Melissa Kroll, one of our staff attorneys who handles most of our estate planning work. And then other guests include June Fan in the back. And June is the founder and owner of the Gift of Love. Say that. Oh, I'm sorry. Of course, legal is part of the name. So Gift of Love Legal is June's firm that helps people with estate planning. And so she'll be talking more about what that work includes. And then our last two guests include Holly and Nicole. We're so thrilled that they're with us today. They are both with the DC Long-Term Care Ombudsman's Office, which is some kind of acronym. I don't know what that spells out, but the DC and they'll talk more about their work, but they are connected to Legal Counsel for the Elderly, which is a part of AARP National. And so they're doing amazing work troubleshooting for us on all fronts when it comes to elder services here in the district. And that's something I hope, as we walk through the different topics and documents, feel free, please, to raise your hand and interrupt us with your questions. The whole point of us being here today is really to respond to your questions and your needs. So if something strikes you, as something you'd like to hear more about, please do not hesitate to interrupt us. We're happy to be interrupted. And then we will have a Q&A time at the end. So hopefully all of your thoughts and questions will be addressed. To give you just a broad overview of what we're going to do today, we were going to start by talking about different estate planning documents and what those include, such as powers of attorney, a will, disposition of bodily remains, and related documents. And then we thought next we'd talk about funeral planning and life insurance options, particularly life insurance options for folks living with HIV. And then we'll talk about guardianship and conservatorship, how that works. And then we'll talk about home health care, the EPD waiver program, which is something that we partner frequently with Holly and Nicole on from Whtiman Walker. And then lastly, we'll talk about public benefits available to older folks. That we have a very detailed handout about public benefits, and that may be the one thing we don't dive into in great detail, but you can always call us or email us after the fact. Whtiman Walker has a whole public benefits department dedicated to helping people enroll in and maintain coverage in different programs. So we are excited to be able to talk to you about that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and June, who are going to talk about exciting. Ta-da! Okay.
everybody. My name is Melissa Krull, and I'm with Whitman Walker.
And my name is June Fan, and I am the founder and owner of Gift of Love Legal, and we help individuals and families with estate planning in DC and Maryland.
Okay, so what I thought we would start by doing is just mention the 4 estate planning documents that Whitman Walker provides to our clients, and also that June would also be more than happy to assist with. So the first document, we'll just jump right in. The first document is called a general power of attorney. And that is a document that gives a lot of powers to an agent that you select to handle a lot of financial tasks, a lot of things like paying your bills, taking checks and depositing them on your behalf. Um, and again, it would come to power this document very strong when you sign it. So the folks that you name as your agent, we would have you name a primary agent, and if possible, a successor agent would be, you'd want to name somebody who you trust quite a bit, someone who is good with finances, someone that you trust. Because when you execute this document, it's in power at the time that you sign it. So it's a very strong document, handles a lot of finances. You want to name somebody who's very trustworthy. Again, it's used for things like paying your bills, depositing checks. If you were away and needed someone come to your apartment to look after something that happened in your apartment, they could have access to your rental unit. Um, and it also in the document allows you to appoint what's called a guardian. And we'll talk a little bit more later about guardianships, but that can be put in place in this document, the general power of attorney. Anything you want to?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was really great. That was really great, Melissa. I would probably add something about the springing power of attorney. So there are 2 types. One is the springing, and one is the durable power of attorney, which is the one that Melissa had shared with you about. The durable is the one where Melissa said, as soon as you sign it, this person that you named to can technically step in your shoes and show up at the bank with the document saying, Melissa appointed me to come withdraw $500 from her checking account. Um, the second type is called springing. And what that means is that it the person that you name, Melissa, can't come step into my shoes until something happens. And that's what the document will say. And you can choose what you want that event to be. It could be maybe when I get admitted to the hospital and the doctor declares that I will be in a coma for however long time and I need somebody to step in for me. So that document is springing. And so it just really depends on what your preference is. Sometimes people just automatically want to give that power to the person that they name right away. Some people don't feel really comfortable doing that for various reasons, and so they want something to actually happen, and that's where you would indicate that on the document. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
Sure. The audience member, who we greatly appreciate, pointed out if you do the durable power of attorney, that doesn't mean you can't do anything for yourself. You're still fully capable of doing your day to day tasks, just you have this document in place for someone else to step in should you need them. And that's a little bit to what June spoke about. Here at Whitman Walker, we do a lot of durable, which means when you sign it, it's in place. And that's the document we provide to a lot of our folks. If you want to have a springing document, you'll want to see June. That's just a little bit different. And again, you can lay down some guidelines about when this document becomes effective under what circumstances. And June would be fabulous to talk that out with you. Do you have any other on the power of attorney before we move on?
I just one last
Sure.
thing. One caveat to the springing is you do have to keep in mind, for example, if on your document you say, well, it has to be when I'm determined that I can't manage my own affairs by my primary doctor, well, what if you happen to be abroad and you're stuck abroad and you can't make it back, but you need to get a hold of the money in your account? and your document says that the person that you named can't step into your shoes unless this event happens. So when you do come up with that, you also kind of have to keep in mind those things to take into consideration.
Great, thank you. The second document that we provide here at Whitman Walker is called a healthcare power of attorney, and I like to describe that document as having two parts. The first part is a healthcare power of attorney, similar to what we just said. You will appoint an agent. If you have a backup agent, that's great as well. But this person is getting powers and acting for you in matters that relate to your healthcare decisions and choices related to healthcare, and they also would have access to your medical records so they could make these sort of informed decisions. So that's the first part of a healthcare power of attorney, is appointing an agent to act for you in those instances. And the second part is sometimes referred to as a living will. And that is where they give you those three tortured scenarios. If you're in this, fact pattern, what type of care do you want to receive? And they give you three choices that vary a span of different options. And then you would select in that scenario, which of these choices would you want? And of course, we can certainly tailor them somewhat to your needs, but that's just kind of how those documents are structured. So do you want to?
I think you covered pretty much, yeah, the main gist of living will and medical directives. Yeah.
And I mean, there's also things in there about, you got to think, so you have those three situations, but you also have a section on, pain medication. What type of pain meds do you want to receive, and what circumstances? And what if you want to feel nothing? You just want that pain medication, but what if that hastens your death? So there's these fact patterns that you have to consider and think about. And it's really meant to have you think about them now when it's not in play and you're not in these situations. And also to have some guidance in place for your healthcare provider and the person you appoint as your agent, to give them some idea, about what care you are wanting to receive when you're in these incapacitated states. Okay. The third document is called a disposition of bodily remains, and that's a real short one-pager, and it's really appointing an agent for yourself to, if there ever was a need to identify a body, that would be your point person. If it's also your time to kind of give a little instruction about what you would like to have happen once you've passed. Um, Things to think about, pronouns that you'd like used in any sort of materials, any dress or attire that you would like to be in, or photographs of you, any, flowers or song or anything you would like to lay down as instructions for your agents related to your passing. If you want to be cremated, if you want to have a service, if you want to have a funeral, this is your opportunity to put that in a document and memorialize it.
Yeah, I was just going to add, this is your way of personalizing how you want your life to be celebrated.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Do you want? Oh, there's a
Well, never give a pastor a microphone.
great.
Also, along that line, is wanted to mention for those who are members of MCCDC, you might remember when you came into membership, there was a final wishes worksheet that asked some of those same questions. How would you want your service to look? Who would you want notified? And it's in your membership file. So if you're filling out one of these, you can put it in your membership file, or you can fill out what's in your membership file and connect to this so that everyone is aware of what your wishes are. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for adding that. The fourth document, of course, is the last will and testament. I've had clients say it's my most recent will and not their last will, but truly, it's a document where you will appoint what's called an executor or a personal representative. And the will comes to power, it springs to power when you've passed away. Until this point, while you're still alive and you're still on this earth, your powers of attorney are in place, and you have agents under those documents who are able to assist. But once you've passed, those documents sunset. And then your will comes to power, and it's your executor who's in charge of doing things on your behalf because you're no longer here. Um, the will, thinking about what the will controls, certain assets fall inside of your will, your sole named assets, and certain assets are outside of your will, meaning they pass outside the terms of your will. And those types of assets would be those that have a designee beneficiary on them. Oftentimes we see those on retirement accounts, or if you have a bank account, checking or savings account that you've made transfer upon death or payable upon death. In those instances where you've named a beneficiary ahead of time, when you pass away, those assets will just go to those individuals that you've named. So the will is here, you know, to name your executor, to handle your sole named assets, the things that you don't have other beneficiaries designated for. And it involves your tangible personal property, things within your home, like furniture, vehicles, but it also gives you the opportunity if there's some piece of property that's very sentimental to you, or like an heirloom, you can do specific bequests through your will. So you can say this piece of art or this piece of jewelry that's been in my family for so many generations, I want to make sure that goes to so and so. And so that's another benefit of having a will, is you're clearly making these instructions to your executor on where you want different assets to go and to whom. So we've talked about tangibles, we've talked about specific bequests, and then the leftover of your estate is called your residue. So your residuary estate, what's left over. And that's also for your executor to decide based on what you have in your will. So you can say, what's ever left over, I want a certain percentage to go to this individual or perhaps this charity, or I want, to divide it up a third, a third, a third. So you do have to give some thought to what remains, what's left over, and where does it go to, tidy up your estate so there's nothing left over. Do you have other? I can pass the mic off for the moment.
Thank you, Melissa. I think oh, sure, we have some questions.
Since I have the mic, I want to ask one question related to executors executing the uh, going to court. That's called
That would be administering
probate.
your, yep.
Going to probate. The disposition of property, physical, like a house and real estate. Can any of that be handled prior to going to probate?
Sure. So that's a great question. So that's called administering your estate. So when you've passed away, your will is in power, you can go to probate to handle those types of assets. So you mentioned real estate. So if you're living in the District of Columbia and you're still alive, you haven't passed away, one of the things you might want to consider is a transfer onto the deed. You can do a special type of deed. So when you pass away, it will avoid probate. It will just go to whoever you've designated, and that's in DC. So there are some options if you're looking to avoid probate. I enjoy probate. I used to work as an estate administrator attorney. I like it, and I don't think it's a dirty word or a difficult process. And your will is really there to guide it. And it's based in DC, again, there's a small estates department and there's a large estates department. Depending on what the asset is, you would work with one of two departments, and they're both lovely. You don't hear that every day. I think they're both lovely departments to work with. They're really helpful with the paperwork and that sort of thing. So, did that? No. At one time, they used to be where you would take them. I think Maryland used to hold deeds for you, but they don't anymore. I think they just got to be too much paper for everybody to hold on to. So once you do these documents, all of the ones I've mentioned today, you can sign them with us at Whtiman Walker, and documents will have two witnesses who are not interested. They're not receiving anything from you. You don't know them. And then we'll also have a wonderful notary, best in the business, notary Lee Hicks, who will be there to notarize the documents. We'll make all the copies you need for all of your agents, and you'll go home with the original. We won't keep the originals for you. We will keep the word processing in case you need to make an edit down the road. We'll have that electronic form to make those edits. But we give you, when you leave with all your good paperwork and feeling of accomplishment, we do give you a little cheat sheet to say, where do you keep these important documents? Because you want to keep them safe, but not so safe that nobody can get to them or no one knows where they are. So we wouldn't recommend putting them like in a safe deposit box at a bank because it would be so difficult for anyone to get there or to know that's where they are. So we just want you to keep the documents, the originals, in a safe place where you keep other important paperwork and you know where it is, it's easily accessible. And also, your agents will have a copy, not of the will, because we don't recommend that, because you're always likely or able to change your will. So you don't want to give that out, pass it around, and then make changes. But your other documents, your other powers of attorneys and things, yes, you could share those with your agent. You should have a discussion with them so they know, hey, I'm going to be wearing this really important hat one day. So they should have a copy with them.
One thing, yes, we have another question.
Yes, I know of one option that I could use, but I wanted to know what other options I would have if I wanted to leave, let's say, something to some relatives. They're minors at this point, but I don't want the adults who oversee them to be in charge of them. Okay, so I wanted to know what are some other options? I know of one, but I'm thinking that there has to be more options out.
Oh, and what's your name, sir?
Robert.
Robert, good to
Yes,
meet you.
thank you.
So I'm curious, what's that one option?
Was- One would be to put it in the individual's name and then say that they can only touch it when they become an adult. Okay, and in that way, whoever is watching over them cannot touch.
Right. Robert, right? Robert, what's the item? What's the asset?
Money.
Cash?
Yeah, well, I mean, like
It's in a bank account?
like different accounts and stuff like
Is there a treasure map? And
Oh, well,
that is option number 2.
a treasure map.
Unofficially.
Oh,
No, I'm teasing you. So you have
I know you. I
you
know
have
you.
some funds that you want to set aside. They're cash. They could be in an account. When you pass away, you want them to go to where you want them to go, but that person, is it one person, multiple individuals?
It would be well. I'm thinking two in my mind.
Okay.
'Cause,
And
I mean, change because
and they're minors.
150 things.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
That's okay. I have the same problem too with the mic.
Okay.
Okay, multiple folks, and you want to hold it in trust for them until they reach a certain age where you feel they're responsible and can have access to it. You're worried about giving it to their guardian or their parent or whoever that they might spend it and it might not go where you want it to go.
Right.
June, do you want to handle that? It might be
Yeah, thank you. I was actually going to say the same thing. Usually for minors, you would want the funds to go into a trust.
I trust. Okay.
Yeah, and there are various types of trust available for them. So that's where maybe some one-on-one time to talk more about your specifics would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. And one other question.
sure.
I think Lewis had mentioned something about probate. Um, my understanding is that when you put things into probate, it's taxed, and I say that from the standpoint of I've had relatives and my partner and so forth and so on, where like for example, part of his estate went through probate because I inadvertently left out. I mean, all right. I inadvertently left out a $50,000 policy. Okay. And what happened was when it went through probate, I ended up getting maybe about 33,000 after it went through probate. And fast forward at the time, I was like, what in the world are they taking $17,000 for? And whereas the other policies and the rest of his estate and all, that went directly to me. Okay, so, and it was no tax or nothing. I mean, so my question is, when you mentioned probate, um, is that still taxed? Because this was like years ago. Is that still taxed a lot? And why is it that much?
You know, I don't have the specific facts to your situation. Without looking at the payments and everything, I'm not exactly sure what that tax might have been. But having assets going through the court process, which is the probate process,
Right.
um, it just really depends. You know, you're still going to be, you know, you may still have to pay some taxes, or the estate might still have to pay some taxes. It just depends. So, yeah, I without looking at the specifics, it's tough for us to give you that
I'll
answer.
go, I'll go really quickly because I know we don't want to spend a ton of time, and this was our last piece of our 4 document puzzle. But I will say, when you go through probate, well, let's just use DC as an example. They have what's called court costs. It's the cost of going through probate. And luckily, excuse me, luckily, DC has a, well, they used to, I've been a few years ago, they wouldn't charge you, they charged you a flat fee for real estate. So if you owned a home and it had to go through probate, they weren't charging you because the home value in DC is crazy. So they would just say for real estate, it's a flat fee of like whatever. So whatever your other assets are gets built into your probate estate, and you may have to pay some probate fees or court costs. That's different from estate tax. Estate tax, there's a federal estate tax and there's a local state level. So there's also a DC estate tax. You have exemption up to over $1 million before you have to start paying DC estate tax. Same for federal tax. So you don't have to worry about estate tax if you're below that exemption amount, which it sounds like we might be below that here. Again, we don't know all the facts, but what I'm curious about is when you receive that policy, depending on what the policy is, sometimes those earn income over the periods of times that an individual has that policy, and then they pass away. It goes somewhere else, but there's a portion you lose to the income, the growth of that asset that's separate from estate tax, it's separate from probate court costs. It's separate, but it might explain how you lost a significant chunk based on what the asset is. And again, we're just kind of speculating. We don't know all the facts.
Okay, all
But I
right.
just wanted to give you a little more food for thought.
Right, and one other thing, the only reason why I ended up getting that deduction was because that particular policy uh, was not made directly to me. That was a policy that we had forgotten. I'd been with him for 26 years. I had forgotten all about it. And the other policies, and those were six-figure policies, those, it just came right to me. Well, I didn't have to pay a dime. But that one that didn't come right to me,
Right.
that
So,
was the smallest one, and that's the one where they took the most money.
so everyone go home tonight and check your retirement accounts and your policies and make sure you have a named beneficiary, because if there's no one, the default is your estate. If you don't name someone, it's going to pass through your estate, and it's going to pass per the terms of your will and not whoever you may have wanted to designate it to. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just to repeat the question, what happens if you don't have a will?
Sure. I'll just speak briefly and then I'll hand it off. So there's 2 types of estates. There's probably many actually, but if you don't have a will and you pass away, it's called intestate. You've died without a will. Your estate is intestate. And if you have a will, it's testate. You have a will and you're going this other route that we've talked about today with probate, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. So I'll give you an example. So I'm a DC resident. I'm single, not married, no children. And so if I were to die today and I don't have any planning done, based on what the DC law has planned for me, my plan, my assets would first see, okay, does this person have a spouse who is living? Nope. Does this person have any children who are living? Nope. Okay, does this does this person have living parents? Yes, both of my parents are living, which means that my assets would go to my parents. Now, why? Now, if I'm okay with this and I'm okay with, okay, my parents receiving all of my assets, then okay, maybe I, don't necessarily have to do too much customizing with my plan. But in my case, I want my assets to go to my parents and my sister. I want the three of them to get a third, a third, a third. So that's where coming to Whitman Walker Health or working with me would come in handy, because you don't want your assets to go the way the state has planned for you. You want to customize it. Maybe I want some to go to Whitman Walker Health, right? Or to a friend's daughter. And so that's where the customization comes in. Yeah. Yeah.
To
Mhm.
the
Exactly.
church.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
That's a great question. Thank you for highlighting that. Okay, well, I think that was it for our 4 documents. And so we can move on. We can come back. And we're talking about life insurance and funeral planning. Okay. Well, funeral planning, I mean, first would be helpful to have that disposition of bodily remains to give some instructions on what you'd like to have for your funeral. I know there are some programs. For instance, in DC, there's a burial assistance program for DC residents. That is sometime. Amy's given me some looks. Thumbs up. Okay. Yeah. So I there DC does have that program. Again, it's a limited amount. There's some eligibility requirements. The payment goes directly to the funeral home if you qualify. It does not go to a family member. And the maximum under this program is $1,000 that they could contribute. And again, there are some eligibility requirements for that. Yeah, do you have any?
I don't, but I think maybe we could share the information if they wanted. Oh, never mind. I thought
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
yeah,
the phone
yeah.
number.
No, no, no. What else? Life insurance policies. We at Whitman Walker don't have a certain policy or a broker or individual that we recommend, but a service we do provide is if you have a policy, if you're interested or have received literature in the mail, we're happy to review that with you. I know nowadays scams are so prevalent in all sorts of ways and newfound ways and areas. So if you have a policy or you have information you're considering, you can certainly give us a call and we'll review it with you and take a look at it. Because it's not always intuitive. I think a lot of life insurance is complex. It's difficult to think about, and then there's also things you want to see if you can ask for, like certain riders to the policy. A couple of big riders that we highlight. I want to make sure I get them correctly. One of them is a disability waiver. And again, if you are able to add that to the policy, that's great. Should you become disabled, it allows the waiver of payments on the policy. Another good rider to consider would be an accelerated death rider. And that's if you have news of you're terminally ill or death is imminent, you could withdraw some funds from the policy ahead of time. So just things to think about and talk through. It's not a one size fits all, but we're certainly happy at Whitman Walker to review and to give you our insights as best we can on that.
What if you what if what if you're retired? Who does your retirement go to?
Oh, well, it depends on your retirement, what asset it is. If you have a plan or a policy or an account or something through your employer, or we could work on that individually. You'd want to make sure you have a named beneficiary and that you designate where those items go.
So it could be a husband or a daughter or a son.
Right. For retirement policies and things, assets, you could name a husband or a daughter. Again, you could split it up a third, a third, a third. You could pick the percentage all to one, but you want to make sure you have that in place timely.
I don't know if you want to go on record for this, so maybe we'll turn off the recording, but just just your opinion of the factor programs. You know, they'll buy your life insurance and they'll give you the money. I mean, I see those programs on TV all the time. I don't know if others see them. That firms will buy your life insurance if you're a certain age and give you the face value or some value of the policy, and they'll pay the premiums until your death.
Yeah, yeah. Because I was,
My father is 94 years old. He's had dementia for the last 14 years. I never expected. I'm sorry, you can't hear me. Sorry. Um, Father's 94 years old. He's had dementia the past 14 years. I did not expect him to live this long. He did not expect himself to live this long. And his finances pretty much dried up. So the only way that I would be able to continue to give him, to pay for caregivers for him, was to sell a life insurance policy. What I learned, the best you can possibly get is 80% of the face value, and that's only if they are on death's door. Otherwise, you will get an even worse percentage. And what I didn't know, and I'm a lawyer and I should know better, the brokerage fee was $70,000. And I had no idea. I was getting advice from a family attorney who was helping me with, this is in New York State. I don't know if it's different in DC, but look out for the expenses. You're not, if you're desperate, you may feel like you have no choice, but it is completely in their favor because they know you wouldn't be selling it if you weren't desperate, and they take advantage.
thank you so much for
Read the
that.
small
Thank you. Can we go this time, Amy?
Oh, yes, great point. We mentioned, June mentioned that she works in DC and Maryland, and Whitman Walker can help you in all three jurisdictions. And just to make sort of set the context, at Whitman Walker, we are here to help people for free with these services if they fall below a certain income level. And then if your income is higher, we would refer you to someone like June or plenty of other lawyers that we work with. And that's a great question. You obviously want to start by asking the lawyer, well, where do you work, right? Because some people, oh, I only work in Virginia or I only work in Maryland. And so it's important to work with people who know either where you live or where your property is located, if that may complicate your assets. So I appreciate everyone's questions, and I hope, again, if you think of more questions, we can always go back and talk more about the wills and powers of attorney. Next, I'd like to invite Nicole and Holly to come up to talk about the EPD waiver program. Oh, yes, yes.
So I heard you mention something about income level. What is the ceiling on that? Or do you know?
Yeah, great question. So the income level for the free services at Whitman Walker is okay. Well, I'm going to say the max is 500% of poverty. So, oh, great. Yeah, excellent point. Right. So the federal poverty level is a system that's woefully outdated, but that guides a lot of different programs administered at all levels. And so, yeah, poverty level this year is around $1,000 per month for a family of one. So let's say we're talking about our limits, right? It would be $5,000 a month for a single person. So that's about $60,000 annually. So does that help? Oh, and then yeah, Lee's reminding me, we also at Whitman Walker really focus on helping people who have relatively simple estates, right? So if you said, oh, well, I've got some kids over here and nieces over here, and I want to set up a trust for them and a trust for them, we would point you to someone else who really has that expertise. Yeah, like June. Yeah, we are really, generally, we help folks who have a pretty simple situation. Like maybe they own a home, maybe they have a car, maybe they have some bank accounts, but they're not looking for something really complicated when it comes to dealing with their assets. But I appreciate you asking for the specifics because, yeah, we take it for granted federal poverty limit, and that's a great reminder, right? So it's about $1,000 a month for a party of one. And you can always go online too and just type in federal poverty limit. Say you have a family of 3 or a family of 2, and you want to know what the poverty limit is. There are all sorts of calculators online where you can just put in either your income, either by week or by month or by quarter or by year, and your family size, and it will tell you what that limit is. It's the same for all of the continental 48 United States. The limit is slightly higher in Alaska and Hawaii. Yeah. So I'd like to invite Nicole and Holly to come up to talk about the EPD waiver program, which of course you'll have to start by saying, what is the EPD waiver program? So people have context. And then after this, we'll turn to a little bit to talk about guardianship. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for staying here when it's such a beautiful day outside on a topic that's probably not at the top of your most fascinating things to hear about. But I'm going to tell you about first the Ombudsman's Office so you understand what that is. It's kind of an odd word, and the way that I sort of think of it is an advocate. There are Ombudsman's Office throughout the United States and Puerto Rico and some other territory. It's established by the federal government, and it is funded and overseen by the state, but we are completely independent. So we're not part of the DC government, for example. We're the DC Office of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and so our jurisdiction is anything related to long-term care. We have a presence in all of the nursing homes. What are they called? Assisted living and group homes. And that you are going to hear from Nicole about. She's going to talk about nursing homes and all of those options. But my expertise and what I work on are what's called the EPD waiver. What does that mean? It's elderly and persons with disability waiver. And what it is an option to receive services at home paid by Medicaid instead of a nursing home. What they found was it's cheaper for you to stay in your own home. Maybe you only need 8 hours. You don't need 24 hours. You go to the nursing home, you're paying for 24 hours. That's very expensive. If you are at home and you only need 8 hours, and maybe you eventually need 16 hours, and hopefully not, but if you ended up needing 24 hours, you can get those services at home. That's what the EPD waiver is. The reason it's called a waiver is it's a waiver of the nursing home program. It's a stupid name, but that's what it is. And the beauty is that you can stay in your own home. And you have 2 options. One is through the Medicaid program, you're assigned a case manager. The case manager will assist with finding a separate agency that will provide the aids. And you'll have your own doctor. You'll have possibly skilled nursing if that's necessary. You'll have occupational therapy. Whatever it is that you need, that will all be covered by Medicaid. The other is you can actually have, it's called Services My Way, and that is you can have people that you choose serve you in your home. It could be you. Well, not if you're the person on waiver, but it could be a member of your family. It could be a neighbor. It could be some people that you trust. They don't have to be trained aides. They will require to meet certain requirements, including a background check, fingerprints, CPR, so forth. But it can be members of your family. The downside is that whoever is running it, it has to be some family member or a person that you trust to be the employer. They're in charge of making sure that your aids are in place. When you have a case manager, the case manager makes sure that the aids are in place. And if the agency doesn't bring somebody, then they have to find somebody else. If you're doing services my way and somebody doesn't show up, then you have a hole. So it's got wonderful advantages. It's got a lot of disadvantages, but just so that you know that that's a possibility. Recently, United Healthcare has come in as a managed care program, and generally speaking, managed care, as my boss likes to say, managed costs, not necessarily care, has caused a lot of problems in the EPT waiver program. So I'm not saying don't go that route, but just to know that this is an option for you, and hopefully you're not going to be thinking about it for a while, but you might be for family members. These are also available in other jurisdictions. So if you have family members in Massachusetts and California, where have you, these are also possibilities, but it will be different by each state. And generally speaking, DC is one of the most generous. So don't be thinking of going someplace else. And now, to get on Medicaid, and you may have heard of this process, and I'm not really an expert on this. I just help people once they're in the EPD waiver. If you reach a point where you don't have the funds to pay whatever you need to stay in your home, you have to spend down your cash to no more than $4,000 for a single person and $6,000 for a married couple. And you will then, whatever sources of income you have, say Social Security, you might have a pension, you might have a retirement account, that money goes to Medicaid to cover part of your expenses, because obviously it can't cover all of them. And there is technically a provision on the books that if, say, you own a home and you pass away, Medicaid could seize the home and sell it to pay it back. But there is legislation on Capitol Hill that we hope will pass that will stop that. And the majority of states don't usually do it. And I don't think it's done very often in DC, but it's on the books. So a lot of people are afraid, and that's one of the worst things, of going on Medicaid because they're afraid they're going to lose the home that they wanted to go to their family. So it's not a guarantee that it'll happen, but just to be aware that it could happen. You'll get an allowance of $103 a month for your own personal expenses, and really everything else goes to Medicaid. But if you're in the EPD waiver, you're in your home, they can't take you out of your home, and provide nursing home level of care. I have one client who is bedbound. He had a stroke. He requires 24-hour care. His last agency wanted to put him in a nursing home, but we fought that tooth and nail. It's your choice. You can choose to be in a nursing home. You can choose to be in your own home. And that's what the EPT waiver is for. And that's what my office does. If you have any problems, we step in to make sure they don't discharge you. They treat you fairly. We have ombudsman specialists on staff who go and meet people at home or in the nursing home, find out what the problems are, to straighten them out for you, so you don't have to feel like you're alone. Maybe you don't have family nearby who are looking out for you. We're here to look out for you. And with that, I will introduce Nicole Belanis, ombudsman specialist, who will tell you about the non-EPD waiver options.
Thanks, Holly. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here again. Those of you who were here last year may have heard me talk through what I'm about to say, but it's great stuff. I think it's fascinating. So I'll go through it again. But yeah, as Holly mentioned, we brought a plethora of materials. We are advocates. Ombudsman is like a Swedish word, so don't feel like if you've never heard that before, it's not a regular English nomenclature word, but we are advocates. We are very heavy on folks knowing what their rights are. A lot of times folks who are in facilities maybe got there by means that they don't remember, that they maybe quite don't understand. So it is really crucial that we are in the facilities and making sure that people know that they have a right. They have lots of preferences. They have lots of rights while they are in the facility. So that's why I brought a plethora of Know Your Rights brochures. We have one based on each type of facility, long-term care facility in DC, we have nursing homes, assisted living. We have mental health group homes that are under the umbrella of long-term care. Those could be any adults 18 and up. So we don't necessarily just work with elderly folks, but that is the bulk of folks that we see in the facilities. As Amy mentioned, we also are under the umbrella of Legal Counsel for the Elderly and AARP. So our email addresses are AARP. We don't know what AARP does, but we have AARP email addresses. Okay, so we're not, if it pops up as an AARP number, we're not giving you a sales pitch. We're there to talk to you about something that we're there to help you with. We also have brochures for legal counsel for the elderly. I do have some materials in Spanish as well, if you know folks that speak Spanish and would benefit from that. So I'm going to go over, I have the pleasure of going over the Care for LGBTQ Seniors and Seniors with HIV Amendment Act of 2020. Our office was heavily involved in advocating for this law. It's got lots of really important protections for those two communities. And so I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of what that means, either for you or a loved one or a family member or a friend who's in one of these care facilities who identifies with either of those identities. We want to make sure that you know that you can pass along to them, give them some of our literature, that if they feel discrimination of any kind at those facilities, that they are protected under the District of Columbia. So some of the big, so the DC Office of Human Rights is kind of the agency that is monitoring how this new law is going. And so we've met with them and tried to kind of give our 2 cents as far as procedurally what we think would be the best for folks to handle complaints. As you can imagine, this may involve sensitive information that many people would not be understandably comfortable sharing with a stranger, let alone a representative of the government. And so that's when our office, as the person's advocate, can spring into place. We can do lots of things. We are HIPAA exempt. We can kind of execute that power in ways to kind of try to see if there's documentation of discrimination, for example, and how examinations or medical examinations are conducted. But a big part of our role is to be confidential. So we can be absolutely trusted that the person we're speaking with, we only do things on their behalf at their request. We would only share exactly what they want us to say or not. We're not mandatory reporters of abuse. That's also an important part of our practice because it really allows us to be trusted as an advocate, that we don't have to insert ourselves in a situation where like maybe a social worker or family member may feel like that's the best option for that person. Our role is truly, you tell us what assistance you require. If you do not want us to pursue something, it ends there. Yes, sir. Robert, right?
Yes, let's say if someone feels as if they are being discriminated against because of being gay or race or whatever, do you all assist from the standpoint of taking them out of that situation while you investigate, or do you leave them in that situation while you investigate? And I ask that question because a lot of times, if you leave them in that situation, their situation becomes worse.
We, like I said, only if someone is asking for assistance and finding a new place to live. I wouldn't independently say you're unsafe here and you need to be removed because, I wouldn't want to do something that would be against your wishes. If that person really wants some assistance in finding a new facility, that can be risky because there's wait lists at every facility in DC right now, unfortunately. But absolutely, I mean, we would do what we can. We're not social workers, we're not clinicians. We're not caseworkers, we're advocates. So I would try to find what part of the system that would help assist that person. And if it's discharge, I would probably have to talk with the social worker at the facility if that's what the resident is okay with me doing. If
Okay.
not, there's not too much that I'd be able to do. Yeah,
Okay.
but I certainly hear you. And you know, I understand, you know, it may seem a little strange when we say we're not mandatory reporters because, you know, we may learn of some specific details of something, but, you know, again, really that's the protection to keep us very trusted by the person. But there are professionals, you know, adult protective services, et cetera, that are set up to kind of step in place and they would do their own assessment and evaluation of if it truly was an egregious, you know, situation. They have a procedure that would probably get them emergency removed and safely placed elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
So just some, thank you for the question, Robert. Some key points of the law that I just wanted to point out. And again, we have our fact sheet over there. But it's unlawful to discriminate for a long-term facility staff to do any of the following to an individual because of their actual or perceived sexual orientation. And I think that's really important. That wording is important: gender identity or expression or HIV status. So if someone requests to share a room with another person, the person is of same sex, and that maybe is against policy or, you know, whatever, they're not allowed to be denied sharing a room with another resident. Where rooms are assigned by gender, they cannot assign or reassign a transgender resident to a room that's not in accordance with that resident's gender identity or their gender expression. And they cannot refuse to assign a transgender resident to a room in accordance with that identity or expression unless at the resident's request. And again, these are really important matters because we know that, you know, this is already, you're starting out with a very vulnerable population group. And so I do think that there are still many, many kind of under the surface discrimination practices that happen. I do see it, unfortunately, a lot at our group homes. That is kind of a community of folks that I, you know, I do feel discriminated against on many levels. And then if they have, you know, different gender identities or expression, it's particularly difficult for that community. But we, you know, we want folks to know that if they have a preference, and they also do not have to disclose information, that's very important too. So other things that are covered in the law that I think are really important is even things like clothing, cosmetics, accessories, memorabilia in your room, you know, decorations, grooming practices, all of those preferences are protected under this law. And again, the kind of the first go-to for an official complaint against a facility would be the DC Department, the Office of Human Rights. But again, our posters should be on the wall at any facility that you go to in DC with our number, our hotline number is also on our brochures. So we could definitely intercede as well if you feel that there are situations where folks are being denied some of their rights. And then the last category I wanted to get to is medical care. So it's so important. Privacy in medical care is so important, and it's something that we don't always think about in nursing home environments because frequently you have a roommate, they may have family over, they may have guests over, which is their right. If you are experiencing a need for medical services, you have the right to complete privacy. There should be, and there are, you know, curtains and other type of barriers in many facilities. Also, you have the right to request who's attending to you. If you feel discomfort by being attended to by a male nurse or a female nurse or whatever, you are able, as the resident, to express that you would prefer, and they need to comply with, based on your preferences and your level of comfort. So a lot of times we'll, we have a lot of complaints about um, privacy and access to care. And so the last thing we want someone who's, in a bed in a nursing home who's been waiting 8, 9, 10 hours to see a nurse is to have someone kind of handle them gruffly, not be very sensitive about certain parts of their body, their preferences, how they prefer getting care. So just imagine, you've been waiting all day, all night, and then you're faced with feeling defenseless and having no choice over who's actually providing you medical care. But they do have that right, and it is protected under this law. So I just wanted to kind of give a general overview of that. If that resonates with you or any friends or family members that you know, please feel free to help yourself to some of our literature. Give us a call. We are here to help you. And I think with that, I will turn it back over to Amy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So we have 2 topics left to talk about today, and then of course we want to answer your questions. The first topic is guardianship and conservatorship. And so I believe June is going to talk about that. Okay. Okay. And then we're going to talk about public benefits. Very briefly, there is a very detailed, I'm going to ask Lita in a minute to hand out that public benefits handout. It's about 4 pages long, and it goes through different programs available to you, whether you live in DC, Maryland, or Virginia. And some of those depend on your age. Some of those depend on your income. But the paper there is very, very thorough. So turning back, June, you want to come up? Turning back to conservatorship and guardianship, guardianship is an action where the court appoints someone to look after another person. And then conservatorship is where the court appoints someone to look after assets. So that's the big distinction. And then I'll invite June to talk more about.
So Melissa and I had talked earlier about your power of attorney, which is the document where you name someone to step in your shoes when you're not able to take care of your financial affairs. Taxes are due on Monday. So, that's where the agent could come in and make sure that your taxes are filed by the filing deadline. Now, what if you don't have a power of attorney in place? Let's say I don't have a power of attorney in place and I go walk outside, I get hit by a car, and now I'm in the emergency room and the doctor says, okay, looks like June is probably going to be in a coma for about 3 weeks. What's going to happen? I've got bills that I need to pay, rent's going to come up, and what's going to happen? I don't have a power of attorney in place. I haven't named anybody. So that's where the conservatorship and guardianship would come in. The court will make the decision for you. The court will name somebody for you. And the judge does have an order to go by. Okay, who can go, they'll go down the list. Who can I name to step in the shoes and take care of June's affairs, or maybe even take care of June? But this is someone that the judge, who probably doesn't know you personally, who probably doesn't know your financial affairs or your living situation, your circumstances, to name somebody for you. Sometimes it could be a family member. Sometimes it could be a close friend. Sometimes it may be a complete stranger who's going to come in and make these kind of intimate and personal decisions for you. So that's where Whtiman Walker Health or working with my firm could help you if you're not okay with letting the court come in and make that decision for you. So I believe the main takeaway from today's presentation, as far as when it comes to estate planning, is if you don't do any planning, the state will have a plan for you. It's just if you're okay with that plan. If you are okay with the state stepping in, making it public, again, probate is fine, but probate, some people want the privacy. They don't want their assets their wishes to be made open to anyone who can go on the court website and look it up. And so that's where maybe some people will say, well, maybe I want a revocable trust instead, so that I can have that privacy and try to avoid the court process. Um, so I kind of to wrap things up, do we have one more topic to talk about besides this? Oh, okay, okay. So I believe the gist is if you're okay with the court coming in to make the decision for you, then there's not that much to be concerned about. But if after hearing today's presentation and you feel like, you know what, I want more privacy, I want to customize because I may be in a situation where I don't want certain people to receive my assets, or I want a particular family or particular organization to receive my assets, then that's where some personal customizing of your plan will be helpful. Yes.
Having a will means that something is going to happen the way you want it to. Without a will, yes, the state will designate who gets what, but it can be chaos and things can disappear. And your family, if you really care about them, would really love to have that will so that they can do it the way you wanted it done.
Thank you. And a couple takeaways too is planning for your estate is not a done it and forget it kind of thing. We generally recommend, individuals to review their plans, review their beneficiary designations, review their wills if they have one in place, review their powers of attorney and medical directives at least every 3 to 5 years. Because if you think about it, your life could change. You may have a family member who's passed away, or maybe someone got married, or a newborn child, or something. And you want to make sure that things are kept current, including your assets. You want to make sure that maybe have a list of where all your assets are and the account numbers and who to contact with those assets, so that in case anything happens, you have someone who knows, okay, here's a list of all the assets that June has, and let me make sure that they're taken care of. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us pretty much to the end, and I'd love to open the floor to questions from anyone about any topic. Okay, so I think Lee handed out the public benefits papers, and so if you have any questions, now is a great time to ask those questions. If you have particular questions about Medicare or Medicaid, I'm happy to address those too.
So when you were talking about guardianship, so you're talking specifically about DC. Again, does that go to the DMV as well, or is that specifically DC?
So June was talking about guardianship, or were you asking about the EPD, the
I was
in-home?
talking about the EPD.
Oh, okay, okay.
So was that very specific, or does that apply at all when we start talking about Maryland and Virginia? Are we into a whole different animal? Okay.
Oh. Holly, do you want to come up and?
The EPD waiver is available in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. They call their services My Way different things, and each one is a state-based system, so they work a little bit differently, but it is a national program that's administered by the local states. Yes.
And is it true, Holly, that in the state of Maryland, the county administers the program, right? I think it's county specific. Well, yeah, Holly's our DC person.
Although sometimes people in DC end up in Maryland.
Right, for nursing home care, right?
Because for nursing home care, and I believe that's when you go to the ombudsman for Maryland to straighten out your problems. You're still under DC, but you're under Maryland's system when and that does happen.
And just to give you a sense of the timing, that if you or your doctor or family member realize, oh, Amy's going to stay at home, but she's definitely going to need someone to come in to help her a couple hours every day, the process from start to finish is going to be at least 6 months, right? So when I apply to the day I get that home aid coming into my home, it's a probably 6 month period. So during that period, that's when family and friends fill the gap. And unfortunately, that time delay is there. I live in PG County, and my understanding is that the delay there is years, not months. And so, it really depends on where you live and what the resources are and how well the program is administered. And then, you probably know, like nationwide, we have a shortage, right, of healthcare providers and particularly in-home aides. So even in DC, sometimes there are plenty of agencies signed up to participate in the EPD waiver program, but sometimes their staff is fully committed, to serving their existing clients. So there could be a waiting time in that
That's
regard.
a huge problem, a huge problem.
Any other questions from folks? Well, we'll be around and happy to talk to you directly. And then our contact information is on the paperwork too. And we encourage you, don't be shy to contact us by phone or email with your questions. And again, I just want to say thank you to my co-presenters. We appreciate you all being here, and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. I know this has been really enlightening, especially with us as we age and prepare to get our documents in order. I namely have a lot of work to do, and there's some good points that I didn't even consider about the very detailed fundamentals of just not putting it in a safe deposit box. I'd like to bring forth Reverend Kathy to close us out with a prayer.
Well, and thank you. And thank you for that encouragement to not let somebody else decide for you. You decide for yourself and then take action. So don't wait until tomorrow, today. Join me in prayer. Thank you, God, for this time. Thank you, God, for these encouragements. Help us to light a fire under ourselves to act and to do what we need to do right now, to get more information and to take care of ourselves in good order and decency. I pray, God, that you would go with us from this place and protect and watch over us. We pray in your many names. Amen. If you have the strength, our custodial person has taken off already at the end of his day. So if you have the strength to stack the chairs so that we can get them out of here, there's a daycare that meets in here during the week. That would be most helpful. So if not, got you covered though. But thank you for coming.